It is a stinking, polluted place, rank with the slurry from the factories and foundries of Undertown, which have pumped and dumped their waste so long that the land is dead. And yet, like everywhere else on the edge, there are those who live here. Pink-eyed and bleached as white as their surroundings, they are the rummagers, the scavengers. A few serve as guides, steering their charges across the desolate landscape of poisonous blowholes and sinking mud, before robbing them blind and abandoning them to their fate. Those who do make their way across the mire find themselves in a warren of ramshackle hovels and run-down slums which straddles the oozing Edgewater River. This is Undertown. Its population is made up of all the strange peoples, creatures, and tribes of the Edgeworld, crammed into its narrow alleys. It is dirty, overcrowded, and often violent, yet Undertown is also the centre of all economic activity, both above board and underhand. It buzzes, it bustles, it bristles with energy. Everyone who lives there has a particular trade, with its attendant league and clearly defined district. This leads to intrigue, plotting, bitter competition, and perpetual disputes. District with district, league with league, tradesman with rival tradesman. The only matter which unites all those in the League of Free Merchants is their shared fear and hatred of the sky pirates, who dominate the skies above the edge in their independent boats and prey off any hapless merchantmen whose paths they cross. At the centre of Undertown is a great iron ring, to which a long and heavy chain, now taut, now slack, extends up into the sky. At its end is a great floating rock. Like all the other buoyant rocks of the edge, it started out in the stone gardens, poking up out of the ground, growing, being pushed up further by new rocks growing beneath it, and becoming bigger still. The chain was attached when the rock became large and light enough to float up into the sky. Upon it, the magnificent city of Sanctifrax has been constructed. Sanctifrax, with its tall thin towers connected by viaducts and walkways, is a seat of learning. It is peopled with academics, alchemists, and apprentices, and furnished with libraries, laboratories, and lecture halls, refectories, and common rooms. The subjects studied there are as obscure as they are jealously guarded, and, despite the apparent air of fusty, bookish benevolence, Sanctifrax is a seething cauldron of rivalries, plot and counterplot, and bitter faction-fighting. The Deepwoods, the Edgelands, the Twilight Woods, the Mire and the Stone Gardens, Undertown and Sanctifrax, the River Edgewater, names on a map. Yet behind each name lie 1,000 tales, tales that have been recorded in ancient scrolls, tales that have been passed down the generations by word of mouth, tales which even now are being told. What follows is but one of those tales. Chapter 1. The Snatchwood Cabin. Twig sat on the floor between his mother's knees and curled his toes in the thick fleece of the Tilda rug. It was cold and draughty in the cabin. Twig leaned forwards and opened the door of the stove.
"I want to tell you the story of how you got your name," his mother said.
"But I know that story, mother mine," Twig protested. Spelder sighed. Twig felt her warm breath on the back of his neck and smelled the pickled tripweed she had eaten for lunch. He wrinkled his nose. Like so much of the food which the woodtrolls relished, Twig found tripweed disgusting, particularly pickled. It was slimy and smelled of rotten eggs.
"This time it will be a little different," he heard his mother saying. "This time I will finish the tale."
Twig frowned. I thought I'd already heard the ending. Spelda tousled her son's thick black hair. He's grown so fast, she thought, and wiped a tear from the end of her rubbery button nose. A tale can have many endings, she said sadly, and watched the purple light from the fire gleaming on Twig's high cheekbones and sharp chin. From the moment you were born, she began, as she always began, you were different. Twig nodded. It had been painful, so painful being different when he was growing up. Yet it amused him now to think of his parents' surprise when he had appeared. Dark, green-eyed, smooth-skinned, and already with unusually long legs for a wood-troll. He stared into the fire. The luff wood was burning very well. Purple flames blazed all round the stubby logs as they bumped and tumbled around inside the stove. The wood-trolls had many types of wood to choose from, and each had its own special properties. Scentwood, for instance, burned with a fragrance that sent those who breathed it drifting into a dream-filled sleep, while wood from the silvery turquoise lullaby tree sang as the flames lapped at its bark. Strange, mournful songs they were, and not at all to everyone's taste. And then there was the blood oak, complete with its parasitic sidekick, a barbed creeper known as tarry vine. Obtaining blood oak wood was hazardous. Any wood troll who did not know his wood lore was liable to end up satisfying the tree's love of flesh, for the blood oak and the tarry vine were two of the greatest dangers in the dark and perilous deep woods. Certainly the wood of the blood oak gave off a lot of heat, and it neither smelled nor sang, but the way it wailed and screamed as it burned put off all but a few. No, among the wood-trolls, luffwood was by far the most popular. It burned well, and they found its purple glow restful. Twig yawned as Spelda continued her story. Her voice was high-pitched but guttural. It seemed to gurgle in the back of her throat. "At 4 months you were already walking upright," she was saying, and Twig heard the pride in his mother's words. Most wood-troll children remained down on their knuckles until they were at least 18 months old. "But," Twig whispered softly. Drawn back inside the story despite himself, he was already anticipating the next part. It was time for the but. Every time it arrived, Twig would shudder and hold his breath. "But," she said, "although you were so ahead of the others physically, you would not speak. 3 years old you were, and not a single word." She shifted round in her chair. "And I don't have to tell you how serious that can be." Once again his mother sighed. Once again Twig screwed up his face in disgust. Something Taghair had once said came back to him. "Your nose knows where you belong." Twig had taken it to mean that he would always recognize the unique smell of his own home. But what if he was wrong? What if the wise old oak elf had been saying, in his usual roundabout way, that because his nose didn't like what it smelled, this was not his home? Twig swallowed guiltily. This was something he had wished so often as he'd lain in his bunk after yet another day of being teased and taunted and bullied. Through the window, the sun was sinking lower in the dappled sky. The zigzag silhouettes of the deep wood pines were glinting like frozen bolts of lightning. Twig knew there would be snow before his father returned that night. He thought of Tum-Tum, out there in the deep woods far beyond the anchor tree. Perhaps at that very moment he was sinking his axe into the trunk of a blood oak. Twig shuddered. His father's felling tales had filled him with deep horror on many a howling night. Although he was a master carver, Tum-Tum Snatchwood earned most of his money from the illicit repair of the sky pirates' ships. This meant using buoyant wood, and the most buoyant wood of all,